Hello everyone, welcome to Vert Mode. I'm excited to give you a sneak peek at our new course, Mastering Human Anatomy for 3D Artists. In this course, we dive deep into the captivating world of human anatomy, exploring techniques used by master artists throughout history to create anatomically accurate models. If you want to follow along with this demonstration, sign up for our emailing list to receive access to the image planes I'm using right now. And if you're ready to take your skills to the next level, enroll in the full course on Udemy. Links to our emailing list and Udemy page can be found in the video description. Let's get started.
All right, so we're going to start things off by setting up a Maya project folder to work from. Whenever you're working in Maya, you want to set up a Maya project directory so that way everything links in and it's very easy to get to. For the first portion of this study, what we are going to do is we're going to create a block and mesh inside of Maya using a box modeling technique to explore the structures of the human form and to look at how we can do organic modeling inside of Maya. We're not going to get directly into the anatomy study. We're first going to start by studying the silhouette of the human form to figure out how things are bulked, how the structure kind of sits, and we're going to create a sculpting base mesh that we're going to take into ZBrush for our eCourtshare study later. Now, we're starting this to get our hands wet, to get us in here and get us building something right away before we get into our study, and to familiarize ourselves with the human form and how it looks and its three-dimensional structure before we take a deep dive into the anatomy, which is going to teach us the secondary and tertiary details of the human form that we are going to be capturing in the sculpting pass. To set up your project inside of Maya, what we could do is come up here to File, go to Project Window, and click New. And that's going to create a new project. From here, you need to set where it's going to live. I'm going to put mine on my desktop so it's easy for us to find and get to. Feel free to put it wherever you're comfortable. The desktop is a good spot for beginners because it is right there in front of you and easy to find. But if you have a cluttered desktop, maybe consider putting it in your documents or creating a custom directory. Then I will click Select. That is going to link the location to the desktop, and then I can name this. So I'm going to name this our anatomy_study and click Accept. Now when I go to my desktop, we'll see that we have our project folder here and it is ready to go. In terms of the Maya project folder, if you aren't familiar, when you open this up, what you have is several directories that Maya uses by default to organize its scene. And if you're working in film, one project directory generally is equivalent to one movie. If you go to the side of games, it depends on the studio you work at. My experience in games, I have always been kind of independent, and assets go into some sort of a catalog. So you can use it how you like as an artist personally, but long story short, what it does is it organizes things for us. Now, this project is going to be relatively simple in terms of what we're doing in Maya, and most of these folders will not be used. We can expect to use the Scenes folder for managing our Maya scenes, the Source Images folder for our references, and the Images folder for any renders we might produce. Outside of that, all the other folders really are not needed. You could delete them. The only thing that needs to stay in here is the workspace.mel. Mel is Maya's embedded language, and it is the code Maya uses, and this basically tells Maya this is a project folder. Now, how are we going to use this? Well, to start things off, we can click into Source Images here. We can right-click to create a new subfolder, and we're going to just name this Image Planes. And this is going to be where we put our modeling image planes that have been supplied to you in the course. So we'll just double click this to open this. Then we can come over here to wherever we've saved our image planes. I have them right here. And we can drag and drop them into this folder. Now, you may need to download them if you have not yet, but those will give us the image planes we're going to work from. Now, what these image planes are orthographic views of the model we're going to make. You might notice this looks a little bit strange. It doesn't quite look like a human, but looks like a human. What we have here is the eCourtshare study that we're trying to achieve. So this is one I did a while back, and I turned into image planes for us to use. So we're going to start by working from these and setting these up as image planes inside of Maya for us to model from. So we're going to take a look at that next, but to get started, go ahead and set up your project folder and bring these into the source images to work from. I suggest putting them in a subfolder in case you wanted to work from this later, It's not necessary because we're not going to be doing any texturing in this course, or we might not be, who knows, maybe we'll touch base on it. But just be aware that that is where those are going to go. All right, so as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and set up your Maya project folder. I want you to go ahead and set up your directory, so your image planes are in your source images, and you're ready to set them up in the next lecture. All right, so let's go ahead and start out by getting our image planes in here and getting everything set up. One of the things you want to make sure you do when you're working in Maya is you want to make sure that you're working to scale. Real world scale, that is. Now, what is real world scale? That is when things are the correct height. So when we're working in games and film, you'll often have a specific height that you are given for something like a character. It varies, depending on who the character is and their proportions. But generally, a standard height for a male character we tend to give is about 6 feet. So what we want to do is we want to set Maya up to recreate this 6-foot structure. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to our windows here. We're going to navigate to our settings and preferences into our preferences tab. And then inside of settings here, what we are going to do is we're going to change the units. You'll see that the units are currently set to a linear centimeter measurement. And if you know how big someone is in centimeters, how large 6 foot tall is in centimeters, by all means feel free to work with this and you can work with that number. My brain likes to function a little bit differently, so I'm going to switch this over to foot, and that will make my life a lot easier. Now notice when I did that switch from centimeter to foot, the grid changed in the background. And that's because the grid is basically a giant measuring grid. It measures a single unit as a single square. Let's hit save, and now we'll be working with feet. Now, how do I find out how tall 6 feet is? Well, I could in theory count 6 of these squares, which could work, but what I like to do is something a little bit more automated. I like to create a polygon cube, and the thing about a polygon cube is a 1 by 1 by 1 by 1 dimension object. So what that means is that this is a foot by a foot by a foot. In short, it's equivalent to a singular unit. So what that means is if we had 6 of these, we get something that's 6 foot tall. There's a simpler way to do that though, which is called scale. If we come over here to the scale here, we can use the scale as a 1-to-1 ratio, 2 dimensions when working with a cube. So for example, if I wanted a 6 foot tall cube, I just have to take the Y scale here and set that to 6, and I will now have a 6 foot tall cube. This is how I measure things very quickly inside of Maya. If I set that to 6, that's what 6 foot tall looks like. Now, the next thing we want to do is we also want to make sure that it is level on the grid, that it's going to be at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to use a few hotkeys here. I'm going to hit W to trigger my move. I'm going to hit D to be able to move the pivot. I'm going to hold V to snap to vertex. I'm just going to drag down and Y to the base here. And you'll see that's going to snap it to the bottom vertices of the object. I'm then going to hit D to turn off the pivot mode, X to snap, and then snap back up to the grid here. And that is going to get me my measuring cube for this object. Now, just to make this a little bit easier to manage, I'm also going to come over here and add a visual layer, a display layer, by clicking on this icon. Now, if you use this one here, the 4th one in a row, this is going to be create a new layer and assign objects to it. So now I have this layer here and this object is assigned. You can use the V here to toggle visibility, which is very useful if you want to turn this on and off. P here, we don't need to worry about. That's going to deal with play blasting. We're not doing any animation, so it's not needed. But this final category over here that is blank is going to be the most useful to us because there's 2 categories in here, which is T for template and R for reference. Now, why these are significant is they make it so we can't click this when it's in the viewport. The main difference is template shows a wireframe structure, which can be useful if you want to see through it, and R is a solid structure in case you want to see it. And that's going to be what we want to do. Now that we have this set up, we have our measure cube in place, we might want to name it. We'll just go ahead and name this measurement, and we're going to save. So I'm going to come up here to File, Save Scene As, and we can just save this into the Scenes folder. Now I'm going to create a new subfolder in here, and we're just going to make this our base mesh _ modeling. And I can double click into here and I will make this just base mesh _ underscore modeling underscore 01 to be the first iteration, and click save. Now that we have our measurement cube in place, we have something to measure our image planes against, and we're ready to bring these in. So let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at how we're going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tap spacebar to split into quad view here. Now the way that works inside of Maya is if you tap any view with spacebar, it will make it large, or it will switch into whatever your secondary layout is. Now by default, our secondary layout is this quad view, and you'll see to control these, all I need to do is just hover into them to access whichever view I want to look at. And if I want to make one large, I just have to hover over it and hit spacebar, and that will make it full screen. So we'll be using this technique a lot moving around. And for some reason you don't see this, there are a few different views on the side panel over here. You can see that we have perspective view, we have split quad view, we have a split view, and then this is our outliner, which if you don't have pulled up, is this here. So hopefully you're not completely new to Maya, but in the off chance you are, hopefully that helps you out. Something to be aware of is if you do have this set, when you spacebar, it generally toggles between this view, so you might need to switch back to that one depending on where you've been working. Now, why did I bring us into this view? Well, this is the view we're going to have to set up our image planes in. So let's go ahead and start in the front view here. You can come to the view section here in the top corner of this particular viewport for the front. You can come down to image planes and you can select import image. This will link you directly into your source images folder if you've set up your project folder correctly. You can then go into image planes and you can grab the image plane you want to place in this image. So for this particular one, we're going to add the front and hit open. And you'll see it's going to be very, very tiny, but it is in there. Now, while we're at it, we're also going to set up our back image plane in the same view. So yes, you can have more than one image plane in a view, but we're going to want to name it in our outliner first. So I'm just going to come over here to our outliner, and I'm just going to make this my front underscore IP. IP is what I use short for image plane. So let's do that again. You'll see this time I'm in this view full screen. You can set it up full screen, no problem. You don't have to be in the quad view. You can just come up here to view, image plane, import image, navigate to here, and we can grab the back view and hit open. And then I'll just make this our back underscore IP. Now you might have a hard time seeing this in this view because you might think, where'd my front image plane go? And they're overlapping. Image planes are two-dimensionals, so they share the same space. We're going to create a toggle with a layer later on that allows us to toggle the visibility between these, but for now, we just want those in the same space overlapping. And I'm importing these all simultaneously right now because they are the same size. So I want to make sure they're in the same axis space and they are the same size, so that way when I scale them up, I can scale them all together. That means we have one more to get in here, which is the side view. So I'm going to come in here to view, image plane, import image, and we're just going to grab that side view here, hit open, and bring this in. And that will be the final view we need for our image planes. I'm then just going to name this side underscore IP, and we're ready to move to the next stage, which is just kind of placement and scaling. So to start with, let's start with placement. If we take a look at these, I'm going to start with this side one here. We generally want to push things behind the model as seen from the viewport. So what that means is with this side view, I'm going to want to push this to the side here to be outside of the model. Notice when I move it in perspective view, it doesn't change in the side view because the side view and the front and the top, these are what we call orthographic views, or in other words, they lack depth information. They are flat and they're great for modeling. So we're going to push that back. You'll notice I run into an issue. If I push it forward, it goes over the model and actually covers it up so I can't see what I'm doing. So that's the reason we want to push it back because we're essentially going to be tracing these. I'm going to do the same with the front and the back view. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into a central group. So I'm going to take the front, side, and back image plane. I'm going to move them up so that the feet are touching the ground plane. I can do that with the move here. If I just go ahead and click on that, I can middle mouse drag. And to see this, I could turn on the X-ray mode right here and just middle mouse drag with that Y selected until the feet are touching the ground, like so. Should be good. And then with all these selected, I'm going to just hit Control G to create a group. We're going to name this image underscore plane S, image planes. And then coming over here, we can switch to scale. The hotkey for scale is R, so I'm going to switch to R, and I'm going to grab the middle mouse button here and just drag this up. And you'll notice I do have X-ray turned on. Remember, you can toggle that on and off here if you need to see this. And I'm going to scale this until the very top of the head comes to my measuring cube here. And what we'll have now is a 6-foot tall human. And what's really cool is since the image planes all match up, you'll notice on the side view here, I also get a 6-foot tall human. So we now essentially have this complete. What's interesting is the human also seems to be about 1 foot in depth here, which is just a coincidence. Okay, so that is going to get our image planes set up. Now we need to create some layer toggles for these to make our life a little bit easier. So for example, I'll take the image plane here, group, I'll create a master layer here, double click this and just make this called image planes and save. And with this, I can set this to an R for a reference if I want to just be able to work without accidentally selecting these. But I have one more toggle I want to set up first to go ahead and kind of get this in place. And that's going to be something that just turns off the visibility of the front view. So I'll create another layer, this time selecting just the front view image plane. And we'll just go ahead and make this our front toggle. You can name it whatever you want, but that will make it so this toggles just that object. So if we're working in this view and we're like, all right, we're all done with the front view, I can just toggle that and bam, we get the back view. And you'll see how those overlap perfectly because they were set up to do so in the image formatting software. Now I can set this to an R for reference, and you'll see we will be able to select the front view, which is unfortunate. So you want to set that to an R for reference. But now with these in place, you'll see as I try and use my selection tools, nothing is happening. We're not selecting any of the image planes, but we can still select the object if we want, if we were to take it off of a reference layer. So you'll see how that works. Now, just to clean things up, we can decide if we want our measuring cube in here still. There's not really a whole lot of reason to keep this after you have your image plane set up, unless it has some sort of important dimension. So I am going to delete that. I'm going to right click and delete the layer it was attached to. And for the front and side view, you'll see that these have popped into being selectable. Just to make sure I don't accidentally select these again, you can shift select these and hit Control H to hide. That will set them back to being hidden. That way they won't be selected. For whatever reason, when you set up an image plane in Maya, it likes to unhide those and make them visible. You'll notice it doesn't impact the scene at all to turn that off. So now what we have is just our image planes set up for our front, our side, and our back with our little toggle. We're ready to hit the ground running and start our model. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and set up your image planes inside your Maya document, get them in here, get them scaled to be a correct 6-foot height, get your various display layers set up so you can control them, and make sure you keep them tidy in the outliner here with a group. All right, so go ahead and give that a shot, and then we'll go ahead and start the modeling process. All right, so let's go ahead and get started modeling this object. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a polygon cube by clicking on the cube here, and this will bring a cube into the center world. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to get a center line running down this cube, just down the line of axes across X. So what that is right down this direction across X, or X is the red axis here. And what this is going to allow us to do is mirror across X. X is the most common axis to mirror across inside of 3D, and it's generally how we construct things. So I'm going to hit T to initialize the cube here, and you'll see that we have the option to do subdivision width. If we set that to 2 and hit enter, that's going to give us exactly what we're looking for, giving us a symmetrical topology setup. Now I'm going to go back to move by hitting W here, and we can go ahead and switch into using symmetry. Now there's a few ways we can access symmetry, and there's a few tools we might want to use to access this with. An easy way to access symmetry is up on the top status bar. You'll see that symmetry is currently set to off. What we can do is we can click this, and we can set the symmetry to be either object X or world X. Now, what are the difference between these? It's the space they operate in. In terms of what we are currently doing, it really doesn't matter if we choose Object X or World X first. World X tends to be a little bit safer than Object X, just in the off chance we rotate something along the way. So we'll switch to World X, and what that will do is it will make it so when we make a component selection, it does so in a mirrored fashion. If I right-click, for example, and go into face mode, you'll see now when I click a face, it clicks either side. Now, as a warning, in some versions of Maya, the symmetry is not that stable, but in newer versions of Maya, it tends to be very stable, so we should be fine to get started. Now, the next thing that we're going to do after we've set this up is we're going to adjust the vertices to match the shape of the pelvis in the front and side views. So let's go ahead and get that started by hitting space here and moving our cube to be about where the pelvis is. Now, the pelvis is your hip area if you're not familiar yet, so we will be using some anatomy terms here, and it's going to be right around here that we get this in place. You might notice that your image planes aren't perfectly centered at this point. If that's the case, you can go ahead and get them centered. It's only going to affect the front and back view, but we can come in here to the front image plane and back image plane. We can either shift-click these or control-click these together, and we can move this until it is perfectly centered. So it's just going to be a little bit of a nudge there. Sometimes it's easier to tell on the face, running down the nose there, the line of symmetry. So I think right about there. And if you look at my offsets over here, if you've scaled yours to be the same size, my scale is 22.867. So that is the offset I'm going to offset those by. So you can copy that if you need to. But there we go. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is just get this in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into the vertices here. In the orthographic views, you can marquee select across vertices and it selects them all. So you'll see that it is selecting all of those. Now you might notice my movement space is a little bit weird. That's because I currently have this set to the wrong type of movement space. I'm going to double click my move tool. The movement space determines how things move. I use Maya regularly, so I don't have a fresh install. If you have a fresh install, you might not have this issue. But you'll see here that it's currently set to a component. If I click reset tool, it'll go back to world and that will give me something a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to do that to get that into place. But you'll see that marquee selecting those gets all those vertices selected from that side view, so that way I don't have to select them together. So when I'm working in these orthographic views, you'll notice that I trace around things here with the marquee tool a lot, and that's because I'm trying to select the front, back, and anything in between. So I'm going to start by just marquee selecting these bottom ones, pulling this up to the pubic bone here, selecting the outside one, and then pulling this in to match that angle. Then for these outside ones, we can play around with these and kind of match that same angle here as good as possible in the front view. So it looks like we got a pair of Superman underwear for this character. Now we need to match this from the side view. From the side view, you're going to notice the pelvis has a bit of a tilt to it. So I'm going to pull this front one here to kind of match with the stomach. I'm going to pull this back here to match in with where we believe the pubic bone is kind of terminating. We can then pull this one forward here to kind of match with the angle of the gluteus and pull this one in here to match with where the back goes. So we're going to get this sort of structure. Now, if you want to match the pelvic form, you can actually see it here. This is the ASIS, which we'll discuss later, but basically it's the little hook on top of your pelvic bone. So this is going to go something like this back here. So technically the angle of the pelvis is sitting something like that. In short, what we might want to do is just kind of pull this down a bit more and pull this up a bit more to kind of match that pelvis angle a little bit better in terms of that structure. And then we can pull this out to kind of match the angle of the gluteus. It really is kind of up to us. This is going to be one of those lines we adjust as we go, so you might want to have it narrower or further out, depending. Maybe I'll leave it there for now. It doesn't really matter too much. All right? So that is going to be the first thing that we're going to do is get that cube set. Now from here, what we want to do is we want to extrude the two top faces of the cube and pull these up to the shoulders in the image. So let's switch here to our perspective, right-click into face mode, and we can extrude these. The fastest way to do a basic extrusion, if you just want to pull something out, is to hold Shift as a hotkey and just pull up like so. With that in place, I will want to flatten these, so I am going to hit R to switch to scale, and just scale these down, and then I'll hit space again here to come into the front view, and we can bring this up to where the shoulders are in terms of this front view here. Now from here, we're going to adjust this so that it is going to have the form of the armpits and the shoulders here. I'm going to add in an edge loop to do this. Now, my preferred way of adding edge loops is through the multi-cut tool. So we're going to switch over here to our modeling toolkit to access the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut will live right down here, and it is a wonderful tool that allows us to have multiple different functions with it. One of the major functions it's going to have is the ability to add an edge loop. Now, it doesn't do that by default. To make it add an edge loop, we can hold down Control and then click, and that will give us an edge loop. Now, you might notice that looks a bit like two edge loops. That's just an optical illusion. It's because we currently have this set up to where we're seeing the front and back in the orthographic. I'm going to double click this and hit scale, just scale this to be flat, so that way it's a nice flat line. And then we can come in here to the vertex mode and we can adjust the shape of this a bit. I'm going to move this edge to be at the corner of the armpits. This is eventually going to be used to extrude the arms, so I'm just going to move that there. And then I'm going to pull this in slightly here to match where the shoulders are going to come off of the clavicle. And we might make some adjustments to this later. Maybe I actually want to change that a little bit more to where it matches with the trapezius a little bit better, but that will get that set up. Now, let's go ahead and adjust the angles here a little bit. You'll notice, ooh, that's not really where the head goes. We're going to need to pull this back. And like I mentioned, I might want to adjust where the trapezius here is. I'm going to move those back ones down, and I'm going to move them up, so that way they kind of simulate that trapezius muscle a little bit better there. And then I'm going to adjust this in the back view so that we have the volume of the body there. And this is going to give us the torso block in. Now from here, we're ready to start getting in the legs. We're going to come to these sides here that we created coming off the pelvis, and we're going to extrude these down. So I'm just going to hold Shift and pull these down. And then I'm going to flatten them. I'm going to hit R to scale, and we'll just flatten them like a little pair of shorts right there to represent where our legs are going to begin. From here, we can make some adjustments just to make sure those fit a little bit better. So you'll see they don't quite. So there's a few changes I tend to like to make with these. With these edges, I like to just scale and flatten them front and back. That way I have a nice area to work with. You'll notice they look a little bit weird coming off of there as we refine this. That'll get a little bit better, but I'll just move that to be in place there with the base, move this to be in place here with the next base. After this, we're going to extrude these all the way down to the heel of the character here. So we're going to select the face here. We're going to shift select, come all the way down here to the heel, and this might be easier to see from the side view. And we can just move this back till it matches, and we can also grab this front one here and just narrow this in. So what we end up with is sort of this little peg-legged character here. We might want to adjust the widths as well. You'll notice these look pretty wide, so we are going to want to come in here and just kind of match this up. Here I'm looking at kind of where the ankle is to figure out the widths of those areas. So now we have the legs started here. Now from here, we're going to want to add in an edge loop and extrude forward the shape of the foot. So we're going to come down here to the ankle, and I think this is easiest seen from the side view. Kind of look at where the foot begins and this ends, and just add an edge loop here. So that way we have an area to extrude the foot off of. We're going to go and extrude this foot forward by coming into this face here and just holding Shift and moving that forward. And you'll see we get a nice little foot shape. Now here, we don't really need to match up to where the toes are going to go because we're going to attach these, but we're going to go to where the front of the toes begin. I am going to take these and just scale them to be flat again. So I'm working with a nice flat face. I like to keep things as flat as possible. And we're just going to bring this down here. You'll notice there's still a lot of refinement that needs to be done, and I may even want to move where this line is currently at. I think something like this would be a little bit better. Hard to say.
maybe right about here. But that will get that set. And then we can do the same with the sides here. I'm just going to scale this to be flat, scale this to be flat. And then I'm just going to move this out to where the big toe is kind of being seen, and move this one out to where the pinky is being seen. And now we have cute little feet for our character. And that will give us the bulk of the torso coming down to the legs. Now that we have the legs in there, we're ready to come up and we're going to explore the chest and shoulders and arms. So let's go ahead and start out with the shoulders. We can take these here and we can just extrude them out. So I'm just going to hold Shift, and this is going to give me my shoulder structure. Now from here we can make some adjustments. You'll notice that it's not quite matching my shoulders in terms of the height all that much back here. So I might want to tone back the trapezius angle a bit. But we can come in here and adjust this to better represent where the shoulders are going. I could even scale these to be flat together to make things a little bit easier here. And this is going to give me the area where the shoulder comes off of the arm, or the arm comes off of the shoulder here. And I'll just try and match the angle a little bit better that I'm seeing there in that shoulder area. It might be easier at this point if I just scale everything to be flat as well and kind of ignore the trapezius area. It's one of those things as you go, you kind of have to pick and choose what details you're going to care about, so just be mindful of that. But that will give us a bit of a shoulder here. I can also adjust these so they have a bit of a taper to better match the shoulder area. This is one of those steps where sometimes I hesitate because it can be a little bit easier to do this at a different point here, but you can set this up to kind of match the shoulder better. Unfortunately, our shoulder is kind of falling into shadow here, so you can't see it too well, but it is indeed there. Now with that shoulder in place, we're going to select this bottom area that the arm comes out of, and just like we did with the leg, we're going to extrude this down the arm, and we're going to extrude it down to the wrist. So I'm just going to hold Shift, and we're going to extrude this down here into the wrist area. We can then come in here and just tweak the vertices to better match that wrist, like so. And we'll want to check it from the side view, make sure they're not getting super thick, and you'll notice they are indeed. One of those things that can be very useful is to just scale these flat, so it's a little bit easier to see. And you'll see now that we're getting multiple layers of depth, our image plane is a little bit harder to read here, but we can still kind of see where the fronts and backs of these go. I do still have X-ray turned on in this view, in case you guys were not aware. Two that are very useful is either X-ray or switching over here to wireframe mode. I prefer to use X-ray just to kind of get an idea of the volume, but that will get that hand in place. And once we have that in place, we can extrude this down to create what is essentially going to be the palm here. So we can hold Shift and extrude this down into here and just adjust the vertices here to match the palm somewhat closely, like so. And we'll be adding in those fingers later in a more detailed pass. Okay, so I'm going to come to this side view here and just kind of pull these forward to match the angle. Or you can actually keep these straight. This is an interesting little trick. A lot of the times it is easier to keep the hands straight instead of angle them out. So just be mindful of that. Having the hands going straight down might be an easier solution than what we're currently doing. So I'm actually going to wait on those because we could always change the position of those as we go. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to refine these a little bit, and we're going to add an edge loop between the elbow area and the knee area and kind of tweak that. So let's start here with the elbow. I'm going to come into the multi-cut and just add a loop here for the elbow. And you're going to notice these straight arms are going to change quite a bit here. They're going to angle in here and not be so far out. Now, you might notice the angle might be a surprise to some of you who haven't studied the bone structure. Our arms aren't perfectly straight all the time. We have to kind of force them to be straight. So that's one of those things we're going to study when we get to the skeleton, but you can start to notice it pretty early on here with the form. So the shadow of that's pretty strong. It's hard to see, but right about there should give me what I'm looking for, and that will give me a base for the elbow. I can then come down in here into the knee, and we can do the same thing. I'll do it from the front view here. Actually, I'll do it from the side view so we can see the back side of the knee. We'll just go ahead and place our edge loop here,
and just pull this forward. Now you might be tempted to switch this to have the angle of the knee. I would encourage you not to, for the sake of turning this into a sculpting mesh. If we're creating an animation mesh, it would be pretty useful, but in terms of what we're using, it's better to keep it as straight as possible. And I'll do the same thing here and here, just to kind of bulk that out. So that's going to give us sort of our first layer of definition. And now to give us a little bit more detail to work with as we move forward with sculpting, we're going to add another edge loop above each of those. So on the arm, I'm going to add another edge loop across here and another edge loop across here. And you want to get it approximately in the middle if possible, and thus adjust these to match. And notice I'm not trying to capture all these small details. Those are the things that I was referring to as the secondary and tertiary forms. I'm just trying to capture the most important things that are seen. Notice I am scaling this so that way we don't have that strange angle. I'll be doing the same thing here on the back side. And for this one, I'm going to kick on wireframe because I am having a hard time seeing that. Kind of fades into shadow a bit too much there. It's one of those things where I might need to adjust the image plane. I might go back and do that for you guys if I have time, so you can see it a bit more clearly on your screen. But for me, I will work with the mess that I've already made. Okay, so I think that one is actually reading okay. It's a little bit hard to tell the separation on some of those areas, but I think on that backside area, it is pretty well seen. All right, so that's going to give us a little bit of arm refinement. Now let's go ahead and do the same down here with the leg. I'm going to add an edge loop in the middle of this one and an edge loop in the middle of this one. And let's go ahead and adjust those. You notice the top one here we need to give a bit more attention to. This is the thigh area. I probably need to come back up here to the pubic bone and adjust that. And then coming out here, you're going to see this flares out quite a bit. That's because we have quite a few leg muscles. Humans' legs are really the most muscular area on their body. And you'll see how we get that set up there. Then we can come down to our calf muscle. And this one too is going to be quite big. And then we can come to our side view here and do the same thing. So I'm just going to pull this one forward, pull this one back a little bit, pull this one backwards, and then pull this one back here. All right, and you'll see this is now starting to take on the shape of a human. Now, at this stage, it would probably be a good idea to save. So I am going to do a file save scene as. We're going to save this as our base mesh 02. And I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the chest here. We're going to take these edges back here and just place them back to where the armpits are. So we get something a little bit more sunken chested looking like this. We're going to add the roundness of the chest a little bit later on, but this will make things a little bit easier for when we get to that process. So from a visual perspective, it was nice to see it all the way out front. But really, we're going to just want to bring that to where the pit of the armpit is to make it a little bit easier for the bulking process, which we will be doing here shortly. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is get a little bit more definition on the torso. So I'm going to add a middle line to the torso here, and just like we've done with the past view, we're going to scale this to match. I will flatten this one though, just to kind of keep the flatness continuity here. And we can pull this one forward to match the front area, adjust it in the backside as well. And you might actually have some width changes you might want to make too. You'll see that the body does kind of taper at this point. And I may make a conscious decision to move this down a little bit more to be closer to where that tapering is in the midsection there. So we get that in there. You notice the top part looks a little bit funny without the bulking. We'll get into that shortly. Now we can go ahead and start working in our neck and trapezius muscle. The way we're going to do that is we're just going to extrude up these faces here, like so. So that way we get a new extrusion, and we're going to move these in towards each other to match the neck. So I'm going to move this in on the side here, move this in towards the back side, and just match up the neck a little bit better in terms of the view we're going for. This is going to be for the area right above the neck, so right around here, and we might even want to adjust some of our chest vertices here to make way for this, to create sort of the base of the neck that everything is going to attach up to. This will also make up for the trapezius muscle, so I am going to move this out here, and you'll see how that's going to match the point for the trapezius muscles. I can move this here as well, and then move these out to give the neck a bit more width. So something like that is going to be what we're going for. At this stage, you can also start to give a little bit of roundness to the neck here. It's not too square, and we can explore it in this view. You can see this view we need to make quite a few adjustments, but this is going to be where we get a lot of rounding. So the center point here, for example, is going to go back here on this structure and the silhouette, and these can come forward slightly. That can be a nice way to kind of simulate this and just get a nice look to this area. Then coming down here, you'll see that this is the pit of the neck. So we're going to move that one to match with that area there, and then we can move these back here to match this area a bit better. So just do your best with the neck area. It's a bit complicated, but it does work, and we can, if we want to, use this to capture the entirety of the trapezius muscle. So I'm just going to come back up here. We can use this to kind of follow the neck muscles there and get that neck stub. Now from here, we're going to take that and we're going to extrude it again and pull it up to give a little bit more depth. That way we'll have the ability to have sort of two sections to the neck. Let me move these back ones forward first so they match. And we're going to bring this up to the base of the head. So I'm just going to hold Shift, pull these up. I'm going to scale them to be flat, which sounds a little bit weird, and then I'm going to rotate them just to kind of match better. And we can pull this up to the base of the head here and pull this forward to the jaw. And that is going to be the next portion of our neck. Now we don't get a good read on it from the front view, so we'll probably just leave it be, but that will give us the base of the neck to work from. From here, we're ready to extrude this up to be what will be our head. So we're just going to take this, we're going to shift and pull this up. I'm going to scale this to be flat, and we just want this to come to the top of the head here, so that we have what is going to be the top of the head. Now from here, we can block in the head a little bit by adding in a central edge loop to this head section here, and just adjusting this to match the head a little bit better in terms of the structure that we're going for, and adjusting some of the forms. But before we do that, we need to get a front side of the head. So that center line, it's going to come in handy in a second. But let's go ahead and take these ones here and shift, pull these forward to be the front of the face. All right, so now you'll see how that's coming together, and we have a beautiful looking human, if their head was an axe. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time tweaking these so that it starts to look a bit more like a head, and using some of these landmarks here to help us get started. One of the things that is going to be very useful is this middle section here to balloon this out and give us some width. So we're going to pull this out to start building the side of the head here. And we can do the same back here, just kind of pulling this out to be the back of the skull. As you can see, we will want to come back here and adjust this. We want this to be a relatively straight line right now, so we'll straighten that out as much as possible. The skull does have a bit of rounding to it, so if we wanted to pull these in to begin with, we can, and then we can proceed to do the same with the top. I'll just kind of pull these down forward, so that way we get this set up here. And as far as the center line goes, this is going to be the back side of the jaw, so I can move this back here to match with the jaw a bit more. I can pull that up. I might just want to pull this up by itself, but you can see how that's going to give us a nice center line for the head. We can then pull these down a bit. Looks like this vertice didn't come with it. If you need to, you can use V to snap to vertex and just snap to the local vertices there. But we can get that to match the top of the head. Then from here, we need these to sort of match the width a bit better. Then this one here is eventually going to become the front side of our face, kind of like our brow ridge. I'm going to pull this back for now, and this might be one of those ones that we end up adjusting quite a bit, so just be warned. Many of these changes I am making are not going to be permanent in the least. We can use this one here to match the width of the head a little bit better. And we can use the other ones to match in the chin a bit better. So this is going to be our chin area. This will be our... I'm trying to think if that's our eye line or a brow line. I think it might actually be our brow line at the end of the day. We'll get into that when we get to that stage. Sometimes in the early stages, you just gotta muck things together till you get something that reads okay, and then go from there. I'll bring these up a little bit here to represent the chin bone better, and maybe bring this one back in here a little bit better. but something like that is going to represent our head. Okay, so our character looks a little bit strange right now. This is going to be what we get. I'm going to turn on the wireframe so you can see those a little bit better in terms of where we are at. So at this stage, what you're going to want to do is make sure all vertices match as closely as possible to the reference image. It's important we round the forms as well where possible. We're going to add detail that is going to allow us to round these a little bit more. But before we do that, we want to make sure these vertices match. All right. So at this stage, we blocked in the very basic forms of the human that demonstrate a clear understanding of the rough form as mass. And from here, we're going to start to refine these further. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to get to this point. Try following this lecture step by step if possible to get to this point, and also be sure to do your own pass here where you come in and just double check that you are indeed getting this to match things as closely as possible. You can see there's a couple here in the face that, hey, those could be a little bit better. There's a couple here, the trapezius, you know, there's all sorts of little areas here that I probably need to match up a little bit better as I go. But try your best to get to this point, just kind of matching to the locations. That way you're ready to move to the next stage and start rounding some forms. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to get to this point. I want you to get to this level of block-in. Try and have the exact same topology. That way you can follow the next section step by step.
For the next part of this lecture series, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can catch it when it goes live. We're going to give you guys the full modeling section out of the course as a preview. And just as a reminder, if you would like to follow along, sign up for our emailing list below to get the image planes I'm using in this demo. And if you want to take the full course, check us out on Udemy. I'll see you in the next video.